Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
Credibility is a question now that I guess everyone will put forward when they hear just about anybody speak on any high-profile matter internationally, because we are potentially looking at a point in time where the world is changing in the manner or in a manner that we have not seen since potentially pre-World War II, post-World War I, or even maybe before that. I will say this, I don't necessarily want to see such drastic changes happen, because no matter how good some intentions are, not all will be good. And more importantly, you can never necessarily predict exactly how these things will affect the systems upon which our world is built upon, like economic systems, social systems, and the like. Because I have said more than once in the past that we assume peace is something that we are entitled to, and it is something that is our natural state, when the reality is the sheer breadth and depth of human history, the scope of our entire existence suggests, rightfully so by the great writers throughout the ages, man cannot help itself but go to war over some of the pettiest of reasons. And one of the issues now is that despite our greater knowledge base, our greater access to information, our greater education levels, we are just as ignorant as the serfs and the peasant farmers upon which most of us have come from, who were not educated and who really and truly didn't know anything about what was going on in the wider world, because too much of their lives were being dictated to by monarchs who essentially were dictators. And in fact, we throw about the word dictator right now without necessarily fully understanding either what it really means or what part we played in creating these circumstances that we don't like, that we profess to not like, that we take issue with. What part did we play to bring upon what we hope is not our own demise? Sure, Michael Smollett, this is talking about the WSND Content Capital. There was a piece written by Michaela Pandey, political leader of the Patriotic Front, when she brought up the issue of credibility with regards to how we deal with our diplomatic relations. But I would also argue, I'm sure those who want to be cynics of the government will apply it to domestic issues as well. Now, she speaks with regards to the Brent Thomas matter, the claims and the counterclaims. I can't remember if the Prime Minister directly accused Barbados of kidnapping. That's one of the interesting things. She directed her comments to CARICOM because the plane that was utilized for this international expedition was said to be a regional security plane. Mrs. Pandey goes on to say, when a Prime Minister accuses a fellow CARICOM state of involvement in a kidnapping, the serious charter requires equally serious evidence. If the legal ruling described the removal as unlawful, that should be stated clearly, but to elevate the matter to the level of criminal kidnapping, particularly in a regional forum, demands proof beyond political framing. Now, on some level, the problem is the situation exists in a gray area upon which, while it has not fully come out to say that legally people were convicted of a kidnapping, both court matters in both Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados basically extremely implies that the action was not within the confines of the law. And strict definition within the English language says if it's not within the confines of the law, if it's outside the law, these are admittances by both the then Trinidad and Tobago government and the Barbadian government, which is why while I understand that Prime Minister Mia Mottley is not going to want to admit it publicly, I don't necessarily know what is the basis legally upon which she says it that will then be seen as a credible and reasonable argument to the general public as opposed to a technicality. One of the things I think that a lot of common, everyday people, right, regardless of social status or political or economic means, once you are not some sort of political activist player, is wariness to technicalities. It's not too dissimilar to when someone on a murder charge gets off on a technicality. Well, we then cross our T's on the form that proves chain of custody of the key piece of evidence. That is the only thing that really ties this man to the murder. So he has to be let off. And I'm speaking rhetorically, not literally. But while I would not necessarily outright agree with Michaela Pandey with what I believe is her implied conclusion on that part of the article, I will agree in the sense of it's in a gray area. And these are not the kind of things that you do willy-nilly. Now, the Prime Minister wants to do it, and perhaps we'll probably speak more about our diplomatic relations later on, because there's a whole new round of fallout over the new round of global activity. Let me just put it that way. But Ms. Pandey goes on to point out what is equally troubling is the inconsistency in the government's approach to protecting Trinidadians abroad. Now, she brings up the issues of American action in Southern Caribbean waters, right? And she brings up the potential effect on Trinidad and Tobago nationals. And of course, according to one report, one of the boats had 2 TNT nationals, if my memory serves correct. If our foreign policy is grounded in the protection of our citizens, that protection must be consistent. It cannot be selective. It cannot be loud in one direction and muted in another. And this is where the large issue emerges. What exactly is Trinidad and Tobago's foreign policy? Well, the thing about foreign policy is it is made up, really. It's not generally one thing. Now, if we had a military that was able to project power, part of our foreign policy is how we utilize that military. If we had economic influence across the world, part of our foreign policy would be how we utilize that influence around the world. There's no one thing that is a foreign policy. But with regards to our citizens, one aspect of foreign policy is how do you protect your citizens from any sort of threat external to your country? And that is still a very broad concept, because there is potential criminals who illegally enter the country. That's one aspect, although less so because it's happening on domestic soil, so that's kind of muddy. Then, of course, you have situations like, what if there were Trinidad and Tobago citizens on pirogues that got bombed by the Americans? That's one aspect, this sort of collateral damage by the actions of one foreign country against some other third party, whether you want to say it's Venezuela or drug smugglers, it doesn't matter. The point is, potentially we have people caught in the middle. That is a concern if we have people caught in the middle. Or, and this is the part that my brain went to, with regards to our foreign policy, on how we treat our citizens who are potentially endangered when abroad, when trapped in circumstances that might cause them to be in distress outside of our borders. What is our policy? And I think back to how we responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the one area, or one of the areas of failing, which is rarely tied to the other. We close our borders and we potentially strand our people out there. And it brings up then a larger question, because I'm not entirely sure if Ms. Pandey was looking to speak to inconsistencies of the current administration or inconsistencies of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Because one of the failings or the weaknesses of how we practice democracy, amongst others, is when we go from administration to administration, and that causes inconsistencies, a lack of continuity, a lack of stability in how we treat with issues. Because I would argue that we don't necessarily always do a good job of protecting our citizens across the board. It's not necessarily limited to one political administration, because we left some of our citizens out to dry during COVID-19, while claiming to have the borders closed in order to protect the population, but the borders were never closed, based on a combination of anecdotal evidence and the actual results of what happened to us in the COVID-19 pandemic, when the spikes occurred, how they potentially occurred, what are the possible vectors of infection. The borders were never closed, which meant that a lot of our citizens literally suffered for nothing, because we told them we have to prevent something from happening, except we have this big hole in our defense of that thing. But even though that hole exists, and even though this threat could walk right through, we can't allow you to potentially be another source of the problem. Despite the fact that, given how contagious this virus was, the moment it reaches our soil and starts to disseminate throughout our population, it kind of doesn't matter if the people coming home are infected or not. Now, it was the early days. It was the early days. So on paper, it was not wrong to want to potentially control how our people came home. But any narrative of, well, it was too risky to let them come in, despite the fact that we knew at some point certain people were allowed in and others were not. But more importantly, how do you not let our people in when we don't actually control our borders, and we're not actually stemming the flow of illegal immigrants at a time when the borders are supposed to be closed? This is not an illegal immigration issue. This is we needed to close the borders for a public health crisis that was global, and we failed. And more importantly, we allowed some of our citizens to bear the price. Now, juxtapose that with the fact that our engagements, unfortunately, seems to be based on the political alliances of parties rather than governments. Because I believe coming out of the whole CARICOM 50th meeting was, at least one of the CARICOM leaders said, in a way, in a tone that was I believe, was to kind of burst people's bubbles. They made the claim that there's no political entity in the region that has not participated in the election process or the political process or supported another political entity in another country. According to this speaker, if I read it correctly, we send political activists there, they might send potentially political activists here. Everybody does it. And it seems as though a lot of our CARICOM relationships and even international relationships are based more on party politics than nation politics. And while, yes, we could look at America and say, as the governments changed, their foreign policy changed, look how inconsistent it is from one party to the next. But on some level, the world treats them as the American government regardless of who is in party. But this country, I fear, the way how we understand politics and have built our political system, it's not built on for the good of the country. It's built on for the good of the party. And then that is expressed in the fact that it seems as though one political party in this country is more aligned with the Democrats, and another one potentially is more aligned with the Republicans. One is more aligned with the current government of Guyana than the other. One might be more aligned with some of the other CARICOM governments than the other. We have a much more complex society than many other countries. We practice multiculturalism in a much more complex, yet in a very endearing way, much simpler than many countries who are wrestling with multiculturalism. All this within the backdrop of our own racial, socioeconomic, and religious tensions. But the point is, our society, whether better or worse, does not have a single defining characteristics upon which we point to and say, that's our direction moving forward. We don't necessarily have a list of values, what it means to be Trinbagonian, what we are secure with being Trinbagonian. So when now we engage with the world, this is how a Trinbagonian should act. This is what a Trinbagonian should do. What we hear is this is what a PRM should do. This is what a UNC will do. And what we end up, therefore, is a lot of inconsistency. And dare I say that what people are observing now with their issues, with how we see a lack of consistency, which then leads to a lack of credibility, dare I say, once again, ultimately, the responsibility lies with how we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, when we engage in our democratic process, both during elections as well as all and any other time period upon which we should be exercising certain functions as citizens within a democracy. How we engaged in our country, in the governance of our country, in building the narrative of our country, in upholding, supporting, and if necessarily redefining the values of our country, or rather the failure of all of those things, leads us to this. It's easy to just blame the politicians. We could blame the PRM for what happened, all of the things that we perceive to be wrong during COVID. Oh no, we didn't vote them back in. No. They did it. We could blame the current government for its stances on these now growing complex issues revolved around global conflicts upon which most of us barely understand, if at all. Because look what happened when they were in the Southern Caribbean. We were running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We've never experienced this before. It's easy to blame the politicians, but they are a reflection from us. Where did they come from? They are not citizens of this country. They didn't grow up for the most part in this country. Their careers were not only rooted in this country, to some extent, yes, some of them might have worked in academia or had stints or tenures in other parts of the region or the world, but for the most part, their political careers obviously are rooted in this part of the world, in our country specifically. It is political careers that, for them to reach in Parliament, what that means is we the people endorse them. We the people condone them. You don't like what the government is doing, on some level, it's not just the government's fault, it's our fault. You don't like what the opposition is doing, on some level, it's not just their fault, it's our fault. These are the people who we apparently choose. And if you want to say, well, I did not vote I didn't select the candidates, whose fault is that? If you were not part of the process upon which the candidates for the parties were selected, then, you know, you ignore your duty, you take your chances. Meanwhile, this is a political environment that has allowed, once again, a minister has said the words, and this is extremely frustrating to me, because this is another situation where it's a high-profile criminal matter, or case tied to criminal matter. The file on Brent Thomas has gone missing. The Minister of Defense confirmed the file was indeed missing. The last Minister of National Security has said the file never crossed his desk. The minister before him, no comment. Why is it that we can see similar patterns of behavior across the spectrum, and yet people get upset when you say, well, they're more alike than we would like to admit? Different sides of the same coin, because the coin is things like this. A high-profile case that has serious implications for the justice system, the criminal justice system in the country, and the file just disappears from within the offices of a national security ministry, whether it is before the transition in the new administration or after. We don't know. I think one of the implications is that the Ministry of National Security then lost it, and the new government was elected, and they split the ministries, and it's not their fault. But how do we know this? The Minister of Defense did not give us any more details to say the potential suspected timeline of when this file went missing. So for all we know, it could have gone missing on the desk of the Minister of Homeland Security or the Minister of Defense or whoever else. But at the end of the day, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter exactly when it went missing and under whose tenureship. Because even if it went missing under PNM Minister of National Security, why is it we only hang about this now? Potentially, why is, if they told us when they discovered it, we would have expectations of the problem being solved. And they, and by they I mean just about all political leadership, doesn't like having expectations hanging over their heads. It's easier to tell us nothing in this country, so that we don't have expectations, so that we can't hold them to account of standards. Because if this file went missing under the PNM's tenure, the current administration should have said so off the jump, and then said what they were going to do about it to resolve the situation, not just to cast blame. The last time it potentially is costing us $20 million. Also, I assume the implication is that case is more or less dead in the water. That's a murder investigation. That's a high-profile murder investigation the last time. This time, it's a high-profile international incident that involves current members of the TTPS executive leadership and potentially involves major political players in at least this country. One would think this is a bloody layup. Because at the end of the day, it's not like I want to see the PNM suffer, but I want answers for something that obviously something significantly went wrong somewhere, and it wasn't an accident, it was intentional. But now, what I'm left to wonder is either the current administration is not competent enough to handle the fallout of this situation, whether or not they were actively involved in it, or they're just trying to play catch up. Or two, there are certain loopholes that they don't want closed themselves. And if I was the member of the TTPS executive that is known to be involved, one of the things that I would consider as someone of integrity is, by having this hang over my head, it now casts suspicion upon me, because why would they not want certain loopholes closed? Why would they not want certain avenues of less than legal means to be cut off? And how does that make me look? It's almost like if they want certain potential, the potential of certain actions to be available to them in the future, and they want to keep the person who has proven to potentially do such actions on the payroll. Now, I'm going to wrap this up here. I didn't necessarily intend to mention this today, but it's fitting. And I won't go into too much details because there's a lot of mess involved. But I'll say this. I have been told of an incident that happened in a school. The incident is extremely bad. Extremely bad. But there are two problems. One is the actual action itself, which I can't get into. I wait to see how that continues to unfold. But the other part about it is, and all I will say is this happened in a school. And from what I understand, unless there's information, critical information that I'm missing, based on people who are involved in the situation, or what they have told me, a heinous incident happened in a school. School children are victims. And the school itself apparently wants to cover it up. Does not want it to get out there publicly. Does not want to engage in the proper disciplinary and, if necessary, criminal justice elements in order to rectify this situation, because they rather save face, because their face is more important than protecting their own students, because they don't want to be criticized over something so heinous, because I guess they fear the fallout over something that bad, and yet somehow they think it's fine. This will never come to light. And on some level, based on my understanding, they weren't entirely wrong. In the sense of how they could keep it a secret, not all the victims have come forward. We don't know how long this has gone on for and how many victims there are. I only know of 2. But this goes to our politicians come from us. You have an issue with the current government, that's nice. You think they do things that the rest of the population doesn't do? They don't skate the rules in a way that the rest of the population doesn't skate the rules? They don't try to cover things up in a manner upon which many of our own citizens, whether private or public, will not attempt to cover their own backsides and not do their duty and hide, cover up, keep secret the truth, not speak out. Choose to not speak out. Choose to allow victims to suffer in silence. You think this is just unique to politicians, unique to people in power? You think this is not an activity that to some extent is not learned along the way? Or the trickle-down effect. Why am I looking to be a saint when it is public knowledge, to some extent, It is a matter of public record within news publications, some of the nonsense that various cabinet ministers throughout the last 20 to 30 years, their actions or further in this country. And now our population has continued to learn the wrong thing, to practice the wrong thing, to be incentivized to do the wrong thing. So I will end this segment coming back to one of the questions that I had close to the beginning. What exactly are our values? Because I get it, bad things happening to people, being inflicted upon them, it's not unique to us. It's not. But as a small country, where more so than say, European countries, North American countries, etc., where so many people knows so many of our own people. It's not like there's a lot of anonymous things going on in a country as small as ours. Somebody knows you. Some part of society knows everybody. It's hard to keep secrets. And what that means is, when we inflict pain and suffering upon people, we're not that far removed from them. They're not nameless faces in a crowd. It's not unique to us, but dare I say, what are our values? What are the principles we stand upon? Because right now, it seems as though too many of us are all too uncaring. And not just uncaring, but are all too willing to disregard the suffering of others for our own comfort, not for our own safety. At the very least, it will make brutal Darwinian logical sense if it was only one of us could survive, so I'm sorry. We're not talking about something like that. We're not talking about we're in a conflict zone, there's only enough food for all of us to eat, we're going to fight over the food. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's not a moral thing. It's a very brutal thing. We can't get there. We're talking about, no. For my comfort, for my preference, you must suffer. So that I could have a comfortable life. You don't just miss out on opportunities. You have pain and suffering inflicted upon you. Inflicted upon you in the most merciless, uncaring way. Is that who we are as a people? Because I fear that's what we're devolving into. I don't necessarily look at the old-time days as the greatest thing since sliced bread. But we've had our faults, some of the stories about corruption and police brutality and a whole host of, we jamming still. Hey, during the 1990 coup, people were celebrating, going to bars, drinking, normal, right? A lot of our issues are not just recent. A lot of our potential areas where our judgment perhaps maybe got a little too casual is not just recent cultural phenomenons. But at the end of the day, the world is getting more serious. And instead of becoming a more serious population, we just want to, we're not pointing one finger anymore, now we're pointing two fingers. It's all your fault. It's not our fault. But it's not just in the politics where bad things happen and are inflicted upon in this country. It is the fact that we, on some level, have no backbone. Nobody wants to get involved. Nobody wants to do the right thing. Nobody wants to stand up and stand out. Nobody wants to risk being alone, being looked at as someone who is a moron or ridiculed as someone who's overeager or crazy because they are going to rock the boat. And who wants to rock the boat? Well, if you are fine 100% with the course that we're heading, and it's not about the government's course, some of the things is not up to them. Some of the economic things, some of the international relation things, we could criticize their decisions, but some of these things are outside of their control. some of the potential pitfalls on the horizon are going to come whether we have a great government or a bad government. The difference is the choices we make to overcome those challenges. That's why I said what I said about the previous administration. Don't judge them solely based on how bad things are, because some of it is due to factors outside of their control. Judge them on how they managed within the confines of those factors. But the problem is, if we want to wait until an election, if we want to wait 5, 10 years after, if we want to give politicians a chance, the problem is, do you want to deal with the consequences of any potential negative fallout of the decisions they make while in office? And it's not about, oh, well, we need to move quick to replace the current crop of politicians. Replace them with who? We have a political system that's a complete mess right now. If you demand more of our politicians, I believe they will step up to the plate. At least I hope so. We don't. No, what we want is the lowest common denominator. We want our side to win, no matter what the cost, no matter how unprofessional, uncouth, inhumane. So, we're on a runaway train to, you tell me. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into what happened over the weekend and the commentary around it. I was told this morning ASP Arun is not feeling well. He now told me that this morning. Still was hoping that he could have joined me. I'm not sure, but it seems as though that's not going to happen. So get well soon, ASP Arun. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into the happenings of the weekend. Stay tuned. This is Talking about WS, and we'll be right back after this.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to Talk About the WSN. Now, this is technically not obviously in our regional area, but this potentially will affect us in part because it continues the conversation, the narrative. It continues in some ways the tensions within CARICOM. Also, it's an international incident that continues the conversations of our foreign policy and our foreign policy direction locally, domestically, among stakeholders, commentators, analysts, and the like. And that has to do with our relationship with the United States. And it's not necessarily, we have not necessarily come to a resolution or conclusion on that conversation because there's still a lot of things up in the air. But part of what kind of makes me very tired of all of this is we got a lot of strong opinions over it, but we don't necessarily see any sort of advancement on the issues. Rather, as incidents come up, we just see more rehashing of the same arguments that we saw back with the US military action last year, or the situation with Cuba, or the situation to some extent with other foreign policy issues, right? Now, the Prime Minister's stance and the government's stance on the situation, I'm not entirely sure because apparently our government has flip-flop a little bit. But at the end of the day, one of the things is after the situation where the United States and Israel attacked Iran, and while there have been some casualties on their side, we don't necessarily know what the total casualty figure I believe is on the Iranian side, but we do know is, according to Iranian news media, the supreme leader has been killed. And now the question is, what is the potential fallout from all of this? There is a lot to be considered. Similar to Cuba, at what point do you have an ethical and moral responsibility to act both in defense of your own people and potentially to the benefit of the individuals of another state by interfering with said state? And to what extent is it just not immoral to interfere with some other sovereign state that has its own systems of government, etc., etc., right? In theory, economic theory will say if one government is failing, then migration will kind of solve the problem. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way because, one, the incumbents will want to try to prevent people leaving. And we don't just see that on national levels. We see it in terms of things like California, New York, where they're trying to figure out how do we keep the billionaires trapped here so we could tax their money, tax their wealth, not just their income. And then also, the recipients, can you absorb everybody? And we've seen where not fully understanding the consequences, not dealing with it responsibly, has been to the detriment of certain parts of the United States, certain parts of Europe. You didn't necessarily figure things out. You just let something happen uncontrolled, why do we wonder, oh, well, what could go wrong? I don't know, a lot. I mean, listen, when you have a sleepover with someone else's child in your house, do you just let the kids leave them to their own devices and hope that no one tries to play with the stove? No one tries to play with metal utensils around electric sockets? So, stakeholders have now weighed in with regards to this certain situation, right? One of the things that, again, I always find this commentary to be very interesting from such a learned and well-respected individual. Professor Andy Knight has said that the Prime Minister is being rewarded for her strong alignment with the US administration. The planned meeting with Donald Trump being an obvious reward, in his opinion, for her loyalty. He does, however, warn that acting like a lone ranger and distancing TNT from the Caribbean community unity to align with the US president with low approval ratings carries risks. And my issue is when he says the word lone ranger, because I am not of the impression that we are the only dissenting voice in CARICOM. In fact, one of the things that came out is over this situation, Guyana has come out. I want to get it so that I don't misrepresent. Guyana's government described what it called the unprovoked attack by Iran on the kingdoms of Bahrain, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait as unjustified and in breach of international law. The statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation condemned the attacks on those sovereign states and called upon all parties to de-escalate in the interest of peace. Guyana expressed full solidarity with the governments and peoples of Bahrain, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and condemned the actions by Iran in attacking those countries. Notice, they didn't say anything about Israel or the United States. More importantly, let's not forget, who else was invited to the conference, the security conference, that we know of? It's us, and it's Guyana. So to what extent can you be sure that we are acting like a lone ranger? And this is one of those things where, again, with regards to Professor Knight's commentary, let's go on to his quote. The real question is what TNT obtains in substantive policy terms and whether that engagement strengthens or weakens CARICOM, particularly CARICOM's collective diplomatic posture. The Caribbean's leverage has historically come from unity and principled multilateralism within a rules-based international system. If bilateral action engagement comes at the expense of regional cohesion, it could be detrimental to both CARICOM and in the long term to Trinidad and Tobago. Well, one, again, it assumes we are going on our own. Two, it assumes that CARICOM has been this monolith. Yes, collective diplomatic posturing has its strengths. One of the interesting things is you can have different opinions on different issues. You can come together and fall apart. It's not as though CARICOM as an entity is a political and security alliance, a unified entity. We're not NATO and we're not the EU. We haven't even begun to get close enough to that level of coming together. Our diplomatic posture is basically no different to saying the Caribbean region. And one of the things is, I guess, that he does not necessarily ask is, because he's saying the Caribbean's leverage has historically come from unity. Well, what he's speaking about, CARICOM and the Caribbean. But more importantly, what will be, given how we have seen things are going, where the potential use of force is no longer a last resort, right? The rules-based order that we want to still adhere to was already broken down from the moment Russia attacked Ukraine, and European countries continue to buy Russian gas. Pragmatism was on full display the moment that the European nations who were championing green energy, this green energy, that, hey, Africa, you can't get coal. But the moment European nations like Germany had energy problems, they ran straight back to coal. They wanted to dictate to Africa, you can't use coal. Coal is bad. But when we need coal, we'll use coal. Why? Because these things, these utterances are not based on principles upon which we will sacrifice for. They are based on interests upon which we want to pursue and take advantage of. And when it suits us, we will go in the direction that suits us. And when it doesn't suit us, we'll shift gears. But what we're going to tell you is it's based on a principle upon which you cannot veer off from. So what is the leverage that we have? What have we potentially accomplished in the long run with regards to the challenges that we now face in these types of circumstances? What is the global national security issue that we have positively affected? What is the global agenda that we see as destructive that we have been able to play a significant role in stopping, in reversing? What is the benefit of this leverage of unity? Because Mr. Knight, Professor Knight, apologies, does not speak to the fact that, as the Prime Minister of Jamaica said, we are not all traveling the same course, experiencing the same journey. We want to get to the same destination. Some people have roads with some gravel, other people, they have to go over mountains and valleys and rivers and oceans. It's not the same journey. It's not the same challenges. So to what extent now do we have to, and this is where his logic doesn't go far enough, sacrifice ourselves for the benefit of a collective that does provide some economic benefit, but dare I say, is it the same? The economic benefit, while substantial and cannot necessarily be discounted, of trade with CARICOM, is it the same as the economic benefit of OFAC licenses to allow us to exploit fossil fuel resources that are under either joint ownership of Venezuela or solely under Venezuelan ownership? As well as other support potentially given in the oil and gas sector and in security, regional security issues. Because let's not ignore the elephant in the room, the transnational crime upon which our criminal justice system cannot stop. Potentially, we might get the ASB coming in, hopefully via Zoom, but I'm just waiting on the word on if and when he's ready. Not necessarily wanting to pick on the professor. I do believe that a lot of people look at it from an academic / idealistic point of view, which is not necessarily wrong. Because the risks of these kinds of things, the severity, the repercussions run deep. And making mistakes now will not have consequences today, but will have consequences potentially, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. Russia has engaged in World War I, World War II, Afghanistan, which is the smallest of the events, and now this war in Ukraine. It has demographic population problems which could severely impact their economic future regardless of the outcome of this war. Now, there are local stakeholders, other local stakeholders that have weighed in on this. Regional security expert Gavin Dira, he said the Prime Minister would benefit from entering a meeting with a firm strategy for what TNT hopes to secure. It's critically important that these exchanges are grounded in mutual respect, strategic clarity, sovereign confidence. Diplomatic access at this level is significant, but access alone is not achievement. And I think it goes to the fact of we have done the quid pro quo. Where's the pro quo? We are seeing the potential of it. We've got licenses, but we still need the deals to actually be implemented, among other things. What is exactly being asked of us and what is being promised in return, we don't know. So it's very difficult for us to have full confidence that this thing is going to end up being fine. Because one of the issues is it's fine to take a side. It's fine to take a stance. But if literally it is, we're taking a side, but we're going to be left on the outside looking in anyway. Now, to be fair, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, but unfortunately, we are racing against the clock. Now, on the wider issue of this whole situation, one of the things is it has caused the local Muslim community to have concerns. And this is where we get some of the inconsistencies apparently from the government. Initially, government has reported our signal support for both the US and Israel military action against Iran, while condemning Iran's retaliatory strikes. However, apparently, the government has withdrawn its support for Israel in its conflict with Iran. Remember, there were a lot of people who took issue with Israel in general over how it dealt with Palestinians, and potentially now this can be viewed as widening a conflict that, if you believed it to be unjustified and it's just an extension, then potentially all of this action is unjustified. Nafisa Mohammed has made a statement, quote, "Now is the time for our Prime Minister to consult with the leadership of our Muslim community to solicit views on issues that are affecting us." To some extent, that is fair. Last night's flip-flopping from the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and today's newspaper headlines are causing discomfort to many. Now, a former diplomat speaking anonymously said the government's shift reflects a desire to maintain ties with the US, but questions the benefits of TNT. If Kamala supports the United States against $10 billion, fine, but the government isn't thinking strategically. But moving on, Director of Caribbean Development Research Services warned that close alignment, this is Peter Wickham, close alignment with Trump could pose long-term political risks. Quote, "Trump won't be there forever. When he's gone, these positions may very well come back to haunt her." That's one of the most practical warnings that I have heard. I don't even know if another Republican candidate is going to be quite like Trump, whether they might be less popular, they might be less effective, they might be even more controversial, they might be weaker, I don't know. But without the nexus of whatever US President Donald Trump is, once he's gone, the whole narrative might shift in ways we can't anticipate. No one anticipated him becoming president twice. Will we be left holding a bag because his successor or his replacement does not want to continue with the engagement down the path that he started? Because there are other hosts of potential fallouts. I won't go into any further because I just got the message that the ASP is ready. So let's take a break. It's just monitor the situation, monitor how it reflects upon us. There are very real practical benefits for our relationships. And that's the problem. Relationships are not necessarily based on the friendships you have in everyday life. That is to say, the relationships between countries. At the end of the day, the vast majority of it is based on what are the benefits for both sides. So with that knowledge, then judge the situation. I'm not saying we need to discard CARICOM, but I do feel, however, that at times, as was pointed out by one of the other stakeholders on this issue, CARICOM was all too happy to seek their own interests with regards to the US-Venezuela question, their own individual interests. Why is it then wrong for us to seek ours? Just because those interests do not agree, then perhaps CARICOM needs to figure out a way to better engage each other to try to resolve these conflicting interests, as opposed to letting it play out in the court of public opinion. If we want CARICOM, if we want it to succeed moving forward. Dare I say, I'm not entirely sure if any of our regional leaders really understand what it might take. Not just our own, but some of the more popular foreign regional leaders as well. Because I'm seeing not enough. Let's take that break. When we come back, hopefully we'll have the SP. Stay tuned.
from Emiliana Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
Respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'd ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide: Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
I'm back here and talking about the WSND Content Capital. So, Fortunately, we have our media ambassador with us. Of course, we'll switch gears there. We'll see how the fallout of what's going on in Iran will unfold, what that means locally. We already have local stakeholders that have taken issue with certain aspects of it, have questions. But before we get further into that, joining us now from the TTPS, we have Acting ASP Christopher Road. Chris, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good day to you, your colleagues, and your viewers. Thanks for having me on the program.
Well, I mean, we're always happy to have you because while some people might again want to disregard what the media ambassadors have to say, yes, I understand they can't speak for the executive, but more importantly, they are important public service messages that we seemingly ignore all too often. So that's why it might seem repetitive, but it's important because road safety is the topic of the day. And once again, I guess warnings have to be put out there. I don't know if there are any catalysts to cause this topic to come up once again. You would think in Lent, there's less drinking and driving and recklessness.
Right, but what we've noticed recently is an increase in the road fatalities, where pedestrians especially have been knocked down. We've had a few in the past few weeks, and we wanted to bring that up, that topic on today because we're also seeing a number of accidents that could have been avoided, especially with the conditions of the road, where, you know, if the road is wet, you need to slow down. We want to speak to persons about how they treat their vehicle, or how they keep their vehicle, so that we could ensure our own safety on the roadways as drivers. So we want persons to be a lot more cognizant of the issues with on the roadway, like pedestrians, cyclists. Over the weekend here, Saturday, I observed there was a number of cyclists on the roadway. We met them up at C-Lots, and you know, while on duty, we traveled along the highway into Right Road, and they had a vehicle, and they were allowed to cycle on the highway up to into the Western Peninsula, and we had to provide coverage for these cyclists. And when I say we had, I mean the TTPS had to provide some cover and some safety measures so that the cyclists could use the same highways. It's illegal for cyclists to use the highways without these safety cautions and the police speed present. So you have to understand, we as officers and the cyclists want to use the roadway. We want to provide that safety for them, but as drivers and other road users, we want to make sure that you all are providing or giving these safety concerns to these other road users, including the pedestrians. We had as I said, we had a number of accidents in which pedestrians were knocked down. We want persons to also be mindful of how they upkeep their vehicle in terms of the lightings, the lights, the headlights, the brake slides, the tires on their vehicle. Over the past week, every week I go out on patrol with my colleagues, and one of the areas, we stick around the Arangwas area because that's where we're based. And we often find persons breaking, like I would have found these 2-3 drivers on 2 occasions breaking a no entry, in the sense that it had restrictions, time restrictions on how you could pass through that roadway. And we warned them, we stopped them, we warned them. Most of the drivers were not from the area.
Yes.
You know, that's one of the reasons we just issued warnings and we allowed them to leave. One of the drivers was a bit nonchalant in the sense that we had to talk to him about his tires. Tires were very smooth. And if any accidents were to occur in that restricted time area, you would be wrong in that accident. So imagine you're in a no entry area or a street that has no entry between a certain time period, and you were to get involved in an accident. And you may think you have the right of way, you had the right to be on your lane and whatnot. Because of the time restrictions, you would be found as the wrong driver in that accident. So it's not just about the breach. And I want members of the public, we understand the situations you are going through, the financial restrictions some of you going through. And all those guys had a job. his tires, four tires are pretty smooth. So we had to ask him we warn him about it and show them how smooth they were. And we asked him, make sure and have these things rectified, because if you were to be stopped by another law enforcement officer, you may be issued with a ticket. As I said, we were just given warnings at the time. And he was thankful for it and whatnot, but he seemed a bit casual, and that's the problem I hope we don't have with persons, with drivers on the roadway. I hope that they think that you're entitled to a warning every single time. It's nobody's business that your tires are smooth. But if you were to get caught in a rain, in a situation where you're speeding and the rain had just fallen, your vehicle would be skidding into somebody else's vehicle when you apply brakes, because it happens with normal tires.
Right.
Good tires, especially when rain just fell. I hope that the public are taking the courtesies of the TPS and the law enforcement out there to not have their vehicles up to mark.
Well, one of the issues that I think some of our callers have had and members of the public have is it's not just that you have some drivers with vehicles that are not roadworthy, but then it is not unreasonable to think at least some of them also drive recklessly on top of that.
Yeah,
so,
and that's one of the catalysts for the conversation today, because we're seeing a lot of speeding in cases of the highways. We're seeing the drag racing, and this is illegal. You would be issued fines for these fixed penalty notices for these offences. And I think on one occasion at Traggery Road, there was the incident where persons were knocked down. And I think there was another one right after that. In Trinidad, seems to have, when we have issues, seem to have it in trees. Well, apparently the drag racing is of some concern now, and we've been tackling that for some time. I remember, especially on the highway in the Bamboo area, they used to gather under the new, at that time was the newly constructed flyover. They used to gather there and have their drag racing and whatnot. And we used to have to send out the highway patrol branch to eliminate that issue and to tend to that issue. So we're asking persons to avoid that. It would cause major injuries, death, damages, and whatnot. To avoid that, there is lawful circuits that persons could rely on. You go down to I believe it's Waterfield, and you want to drag race on the recommended field and whatnot on the roadway. You go ahead, and we want you to avoid doing that on the government road, because there are a lot of other road users that will be hampered by this drag racing.
Well, I mean, hampered would be the minor part of it. I have had times when I'm driving on the highway in the evening, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, so on. It's not one car speeding.
No.
It would ironically more often than not 2 cars speeding. And of course, when you see that, you're like, are they racing each other, or are they just, one is driving fast, so the other one is encouraged to drive fast. But you look at them and you're like, no, it looks like they're racing, and
and it's not with cars, you see it with motorcycles. I just want to remind motorcyclists that they are entitled to occupy a spot on the roadway as a car would do, and it's also illegal for them to pass through traffic as they usually do.
Right.
Right? So I want to remind motorcyclists of that. They are not entitled or legally allowed to pass through traffic like they normally do, as you would see them do. That would be improper overtaking on the right to the left.
Is it that we just take too much for granted? Because to me, that's seemingly where it starts. It's like, oh, well, what if I weave through traffic? And oh, what if I cross the highway but I don't use the overpass? And oh, what if I drive a little too fast? And then, a lot of us think that way, some will want to go further. And then it's like, oh, well, we could just race as the highway,
Yeah.
There's not a lot of cars at night. But usually, when I see cars racing, it's not as though there's 2 lanes clear and everybody else is off to the side. Some people are overtaking, you know, they're going on the fast lane, the middle lane, what have you, various speeds. So they're not just speeding, they're bobbing and weaving, and you're watching the cars, you're getting buffeted by the wind, you're watching their cars kind of sway as they kind of, you know, twist and turn in between the cars on the highway. You know, at the end of the day, no one has warned the rest of the highway, hey, you have two reckless idiots. You know, maybe you might want to make way. It's one of the reasons why I'm like, no, just, I'm going to stick to the left, and y'all can just do whatever you want over there. Please stay away from me. But, you know, there's no guarantees, because sometimes they end up overtaking on the left lane as well, and you just have to hope you're not caught in the wake.
Yeah, that's happening a lot. You notice that a lot. Persons that are abiding by we notice that persons that are abiding by the markings on the roadway as well. You may have a double line or a single line, and you're not allowed to overtake at that point in time. And we've seen persons overtaking traffic at that point in time. So we want persons to remember that if you were to again get involved in an accident because you overtook at the wrong point in time, and you breached the road markings, you would also be liable for the accident. So we want people to consider this. You see it a lot, especially double lines. We notice it. We have to pull persons over and warn them about it. It is a breach of the traffic sign, because it is a traffic sign. Nonetheless, it's on the roadway. A stop sign might be on a road painted stop, might be a solid line. You're not allowed to breach. We're having that happening a lot, especially at uncontrolled junctions, and you would have accidents. At an uncontrolled junction, nobody would have the right of way.
Right, okay. Because one of the things I'm wondering is, I won't get into the whole how people get their driver's license in this country. I'll just say that I am of the opinion that it has been compromised in some ways. And potentially, do we now have to consider that, look, not everybody, I mean, myself as well, it's been however many years since I took the regulations exam to get my license, right? We're not always up to date on these things. I don't know if we need like reminders on social media ads or TV ads or on the newspapers. I mean, we have one less newspaper now. But like something to help educate people, to remind them of what is required of them, as well as to ensure that, hey, listen, we know there's some funny business going on. At the very least, we have to ensure that people who get a driver's license, they come out of the situation properly educated on what the regulations are. Because I think a lot of people are like, there are some niche road sign situations with the lines and et cetera, that they might not be aware of, or they don't practice every day.
Well, besides that, Sean, that's correct. I've actually pulled over persons and asked them if they don't know that they're supposed to do this. For example, if an emergency vehicle is coming from behind you, what you're supposed to do, and most of them say, well, no, I don't know. I say, and that's one of the simplest things that you learn as a student when you're learning to drive. You need to pull over on the left and stop. And I actually pulled over persons and asked them, well, if they didn't hear the siren and whatnot, and they said, no, well, I stopped. I said, no, you're supposed to pull over to your left and stop. And they said, well, I didn't know that. And I've also come across persons who don't speak an ounce of English, and they seem to have passed the driver's license test very well. And, you know, they've gained and obtained their license, and it's difficult to communicate with them. We've had to have interpreters communicate with them, and they seem to have somehow achieved a Trinidad and Tobago driver's license, but nonetheless they have achieved it, and they need to abide by the rules of the law, the roadway.
Is it that, as far as I'm aware, they don't administer the tests in Spanish? Is that correct?
None that I know of, sir. And sometimes it's not Spanish.
Okay.
Sometimes,
fair enough. Chinese, or maybe other. I mean, listen, because I know there are Chinese in the country that barely speak English, so you know, it is what it is. I don't know about if there are Syrian migrants as well, or Lebanese migrants in that situation. I haven't met any that don't speak English so far. So,
but I've come across some other languages.
Yeah.
And Chinese. don't speak a ounce of English. And they have their driver's permit. Stop them on the roadblock.
So,
what
was that?
I just spoke in Chinese. I just told you my name in Chinese.
Okay. You know more than me. Now, back to road safety in the sense of the situation here that we have people not understanding. I now remember I wanted to give an anecdote because I believe I was in the savannah. So I believe I was in either this was where before Charlotte Street you have 4 lanes. And I'm stuck in one of the middle lanes. And I'm hearing the siren. And I can't turn to my left or my right because I'm boxed in. And I'm just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, you can't do anything. You can't do anything except proceed forward. So the siren is early for you at the back. It's for the persons at the top of the street to probably clear it up.
So this morning there was a police car with its sirens on that drove past. It wasn't the most convenient timing because it's right as I'm trying to cross lanes. But you know what? I have to wait.
Yeah.
And then there was a car with its hazard lights on. It wasn't a marked car, so I don't know what its association was. But I assume it was associated with the police car, whatever business they were doing together. Right. Then you have the phenomenon of the cars behind them are like, oh, the road is clear, I'm going to go.
Right. Yeah, we often have to stop persons from doing that. So in the police, we also have unmarked police vehicles that may or may not have lights and siren. Unfortunately, we do have, and then sometimes we have vehicles that we use for undercover purposes that now has gotten involved in a situation where they may have to attend to a report. When I say report, an emergency situation. So you might have a police needing backup. You may need it's a shooting situation, a wounding, some situation that is very urgent that requires all police to respond. And then these vehicles that I spoke about may or may not have police lights and siren. If it's an undercover vehicle, not meaning an unmarked, it would not have lights and siren because we use those vehicles for surveillance and undercover work. And allow to burn the vehicle in that sense. So we have a number of vehicles that the police service have. And then because of the situation, they have to put on the hazard lights and proceed to a report that requires urgent police assistance. Right? And then we noticed when, on what they call escort, where we were escorting some diplomat or somebody or responding to the report, and persons would take that opportunity to follow the police vehicle. And you would be given that. We can and should, but because of the situation, we may not actually do it if it's an emergency situation where we have to stop now, either speak to you or issue a ticket for improper overtaking as well, because you're not entitled to overtake traffic like that as a citizen. So where we issue the where we would use the lights and siren to flow through traffic, you cannot do that lawfully as well.
Right. The people who want to follow, because we are inconvenienced. We are all inconvenienced. We all turn off to the side. We let whoever pass, ambulance, police car, whatever. Right. Probably either it's an escort or an emergency, so they can't necessarily deal with the people following them. But the thing is, now drivers unofficially have to be cognizant of the fact of, I can't just then, once the emergency services move past, I can't just then now go back to my driving. I have to look for some random Yahoo, which is a few seconds behind, coming at full speed. And that's what happened this morning. There were 2 cars. And it just, if you're not aware of it, it could cause an accident, right? Because why am I expecting someone to be like, oh, the road is clear, I'm going to speed through traffic in a rush hour situation?
Right, and I just want to also inform, this is for public information, that if you were to be hit or rubbed down by one of the police vehicles, please go to the nearest police station and make a report. We would compensate you through the insurance companies for any damages, because we may not be able to stop at that time.
Right.
Most of the escort vehicles would stop and say, listen, proceed to the nearest police station, make a report, take down the police vehicle's number, and give it to the officer who's taking the report. They would contact us and at transport branch where we would the information.
This is as you turn off or what have you, or for whatever reason the police kind of hits you.
Yeah. We often have issues with the mirrors or getting hit and whatnot. So let's go to the nearest police station. We would take your report and we would through the insurance company we would compensate you.
Now I want to go back to one of the situations that you spoke about at the beginning, because we didn't necessarily speak about it in too much detail. Pedestrians got hit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could kind of tell the population what were some of these circumstances, because I don't know if potentially this is a pattern.
So the pattern is basically where they're crossing at places that are not designated crossings. You understand? So so you have like a walkover, but you've decided to walk under the walkover to avoid the stairs and whatnot. We have also noticed like there's a crossing at the head of a traffic light, at the top of the street near the traffic light. However, you choose to cross between traffic, and sometimes pedestrians, I mean, it's difficult for you to understand this maybe, but sometimes truck drivers are distracted.
Yes.
They might be, Unfortunately, we have phones in the vehicles, we have children in vehicles, we have other persons in vehicles, we have other devices in vehicles. And sometimes these distracting issues might cause a driver not to see you. One of the main things, Sean, that I noticed as a driver that causes a driver not to see you, I actually almost hit persons who were crossing through traffic whilst I was driving up to the traffic. And you see that bar at the ends of the windscreen?
Yes. The frame of the car.
The frame itself. That actually blocked those pedestrians as they were crossing and my vehicle was moving up. So you're driving up slowly to meet the traffic, and they crossing simultaneously, and that bar blocked. I remember at least 2 occasions that happened to me, and that bar blocked the pedestrians. I almost hit them.
There was a period where a similar story. They had a truck and a bus approaching the intersection slowly, and someone was overtaking them with speed. And it just so happened that, because it was me and the passenger, we looked. We didn't see the car because the angle was that the slow truck, even though he's speeding, the slow vehicles blocked him from our view. So as I'm looking to pull out now, because I'm like, they're like so far off in the distance, right? But because they blocked him from our view, and he's coming with real speed. Luckily, I didn't pull out quickly. Otherwise, he would have hit us, and it would have. I don't know if I would have been here today, right? But it was one of those things where the road looked clear because it was a long stretch. It was just 2 vehicles. We could see most of the road. We are not anticipating one overtaking high-speed car being blocked by such a small, relatively small part of the whole thing. And came out of nowhere, like, we kind of looked at each other. Did you see him? I didn't see him. I didn't see him either. Like, how did we not see him? It was just, it was hard to explain. Some people might think, what do you mean the frame of the car is going to block it? Well, if the timing's right.
No, and then you have disadvantaged drivers as well, like truck drivers, who drive these large trucks, and they don't see other vehicles, especially that vehicle low. I remember at Trinity Junction there, a car sedan, what we call a car, was merging to right. So he wanted to go into the far right lane to merge to go right. And this truck was on the fast lane, which is the 3rd lane on the right. And while proceeding, he didn't notice, he could not have possibly seen this very low car sitting on the roadway trying to merge, and he rubbed down that vehicle, damaged the vehicle. The driver came out and started to get on, and they eventually, they had to pull aside and exchange documents, and they went across to the station. But nonetheless, the truck driver was disadvantaged. So we must all, and persons don't understand too that when a truck driver is also taking a turning around a bend, we say they go up a flyover.
Yeah.
These truck drivers, it is difficult for them to stay within their lane. So they oftentimes, if you notice that, Sean, when you're driving, you'll see a truck cross that lane, a solid white line, because his vehicle is at a disadvantage to others. He may not legally be right in that accident if he does rub you down. However, to avoid serious injury or damage to persons or vehicles, if you could ease them up. So as a driver, I would ease them up. I wouldn't simultaneously bend that corner with a truck.
Yeah.
I always expect that, and 99% of the time it happens where they cross that solid white line.
I think part of it is to just be more cautious around larger vehicles, because you never know what could happen. The stuff on the tree could fall off. It's why they have warnings to keep a distance, because I've said this before, I like to keep a certain distance, and when I'm driving in traffic, that means someone wants to cut in front of me. But for vehicles like a truck with a trailer, they have a warning sign for a reason. Don't be riding my bumper because, But one thing I wanted to add, pedestrians coming from behind large vehicles that are parked, like a van.
Yeah, like a bus.
I can't see you.
Sean, if you know how much what they call accidents like that happens on the bus route, bus route, even if the police, as a police officer who or sometimes are in emergency situations and we have to put on the lights and siren. You see, when we come across that road, that pedestrian crossing, I actually we slow down, because a lot of times pedestrians would come out from in front of them big maxis.
Yes.
All from in front of them big maxis and cross like it's nobody's business.
But this is the thing, aren't we? And I remember when this was on television, look both ways before crossing the street, look left and right and left again. Like, on some level, don't they have a responsibility to at least look once?
They have a responsibility, but this is basically the zebra crossing, the road crossing is their legal path to cross. So you can imagine knocking on somebody on that crossing.
I guess.
And, you would not really come out being the correct person in that accident.
And I just want to say, when you said drivers could be distracted, I remember the last time I was distracted very clear. Because it took me by surprise. There was no phone, there was no conversation, there was no lackadaisical daydreaming about some movie or some social drama in my life. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't saying, there was nothing like that. I was thinking about, where am I going?
Right.
One would think that's a reasonable thought when you're driving. And it just kind of distracted me just enough that at the intersection I was at, now I didn't illegally cross it. But I had to catch myself like, oh gosh, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I could have easily had a bad accident, because there was a car, he wasn't speeding either, so we had enough time to react, both him and I, right? But bad things could have happened. I was distracted. If I was distracted any further, I responded differently. He was driving faster. I could have been, maybe I wasn't in danger of my life, but I could have had a serious incident. It could have cost a lot of money. Could have been, it could have ruined my day, because I was thinking about, well, okay, I'm going down this road, and what am I doing next? Kind of like I'm driving. I'm thinking about my destination. Some people might not realize, hey, you still need to concentrate on what you're doing right now.
And human nature and driving, there is delayed reaction in driving. So it's natural to have a delayed driving abilities when driving on any road surface. And especially now you have the other issues like rain would have fallen.
Yeah.
Like in Port of Spain, when rain falls in Port of Spain, we have a plethora of accident reports.
We do have a caller, but I'll just say this. To avoid the stairs of a flyover, how lazy are we on some level? And then we want to ask, why are we so obese? Geez and ages. I like my life enough that I'll take the stairs. We do have a call on the line from Digger Martin. Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning, ASP Arun.
Hi, morning.
Two terms I'm going to use: visually impaired and zero tolerance. And I'm going with respect to pedestrian be knocked down and pedestrian causing a pileup of traffic. And why I'm using the term visually impaired and zero tolerance, it appears that the police, a lot of the officers using the roadway apparently doesn't see what I face every day. I see vendors in the middle of the road selling the conkers, selling the water, causing a problem. And the police using the same behind me, in front of me, by the side of me, and not stopping to warn those vendors and tell them, move, move, move. Because one of these days, or several days to come, a couple of these vendors will cause accidents, will be knocked down, etc. Who will be wrong in that instance? Because the police is allowing it to happen. Zero tolerance. You have to start somewhere. Sean, back to you now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean, I remember.
You highlighted the issue with Brian Thomas. A former police commissioner said 4 police commissioners after him have not been able to close out that investigation. What does that say to the leadership of the police service? Not only the commissioner of police, all the DCPs and things like that. I will add to that the PCA, the police commissioners. They are all contributing to that dilemma. On today's newspaper is an article was very, very, how should I say, very pointed with respect how the police caused that kidnapping. The judge said it was a kidnapping. So let us not forget that. The Prime Minister of Barbados, through the both police service in Barbados and Trinidad under the bus, she said there was a warrant. And I have to ask you through your program, as the Prime Minister of Barbados, are your police, and please forgive me for being kind of aggressive against the police, are your police officers in Barbados incompetent or corrupt as our police officers in Trinidad? Let's go back to the issue of a warrant. The issuing of that warrant, you have to read and write to understand the jurisdiction of that. If Mayor Motley said is a police-to-police arrangement, they not vetted what our police service bringing to them? Juxtapose that. I'm going to show you the Barbados connection. Juxtapose that to the DSS Susu money, 20 million. Who did the Prime Minister then call? The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Christopher Rowley, called Mayor Motley for 2 senior Barbados police officers to come in to investigate that. And this is a direct question to you, ASP Arun. Where is that investigation? Has it been resolved? Have we been told what happened to the 20 million when it was given back? Another question, and this is my crystal ball. Is this the same 2 police officers in Barbados were part of this nefarious act? Because they have already established a protocol for Trinidad and Tobago police officers to contact Barbados police officers through Mayor Motley. Right? You're listening to what I'm saying. If you look at the itinerary of Brent Thomas, he said he went to Guyana, then to Barbados, then to go Miami. And we know why that was happening. That is in the middle of all sorts of vaccine, COVID, flight details and things like that. Why did our police officers not arrested him in Guyana and bring him back? Why did they wait to a nice, how shall I say, facilitating police organization in Barbados to bring him back? You know why? Right now, or 2 years ago, in Guyana, the police service under the new government in Barbados was being watched. Sorry, the new administration in Guyana was watching the performance of the police in Guyana. So I don't believe they would have touched this issue. So our government at that point in time got a friendly police service. And I'm going to put it another way. Is there a cabal in the police service of Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago? That is all the points I'm trying to connect. And I'm still waiting to find out if you have a response to what has happened to the DSS 20 million and supposedly money laundering issue with the Barbados police. I don't believe if the investigation started got up because there were supposed to have been UK police officers that's part of that. I go on, have a nice morning.
Thank you, Kola. Now, never attributing malice what could be attributed to incompetence. The problem is the way how the Brent Thomas matter has been handled. If it was incompetence, one would think we would get some sort of resolution and explanation by now. And the fact that the AG of Barbados told his government to not contest the lawsuit, it makes me think that something procedurally was done wrong. And that's why I can't automatically, I get it. Apparently, Barbados got an arrest warrant. That said, that arrest warrant may or may not have been legit, right? I'm not entirely sure myself, so I wouldn't say that it wasn't. But she says we were presented with an arrest warrant. I don't know if that's the be-all and end-all of the extradition process in terms of required paperwork. But I just know that the situation had so much holes in it that both our government and their government had to concede aspects of the case, aspects of the matter. So to say it's not kidnapping is a tough sell for me. And more importantly, if it was just incompetence, why is it that we can't get some sort of resolution explanation as to what exactly happened? Who did what? What went wrong? It shouldn't be that this complicated. So then, because apparently it is this complicated, then it opens the door of some big conspiracy theory that is technically unbelievable, but what are we left with? I can't tell people not to believe in a conspiracy theory. I can't tell you that your question is invalid, because unfortunately the way how it's been handled so far by the two governments, particularly our two governments that spans this issue, has left a lot more questions than answers, so speculate away. Is there a cabal? Is there links? Is it that police in the region, certain members of police services like to take shortcuts or have or influenced by politicians? We don't know. But now the doors are open to asking the questions, not necessarily to assuming them to be the answers. There's a difference. So yeah. Let me just see. Yes, Baron, you still with me?
Yeah, right here. Sure.
So he brought up the situation with vendors on the side of the roads, and I recall one incident where I was at a traffic light in Diego Martin on the highway, and for whatever reason, they decided to apply their trade, the timing of which was they started wiping down the cars when the light turned green, and I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous. I think the caller's concern is when you add that to the seeming impatience of our drivers, because there are times when I want to drive at a reasonable speed and the guy behind me is upset with me. We're not on the highway, but he wants to go, right? So I could just imagine where, and I've seen it before, or I want to buy water or popcorn or nuts or whatever. The light changing green, you know, we're on the highway, right? And the car is more concerned about getting their goods than actually like, hey, traffic is supposed to be flowing. It's a highway. I'm inconveniencing people behind me.
And I agree that we as the TTPS haven't really dealt with that situation properly. I as a police, I come across it at times, especially if it's children involved, and we would, especially when it's children involved, we would get involved and address that investigation. Most times I would refer it as a police officer to the municipal police officers who normally deal with market vendors and all that. We could take them into custody and arrest them and charge them, but you know, the caller made a comment of zero tolerance. Recently we had tried the zero tolerance when it came to traffic fines and tickets, and the police service was chastised for how it handled that, especially law enforcement. I remember one other department indicating that they don't go out on these exercises of their own free will. It is always at the request of the police service, and I may beg to differ, but nonetheless, the police service is always chastised whether they do or they don't.
Yeah.
There's zero tolerance or not. So there are approaches we take. We either deal with one-on-one or refer it to the department or the law enforcement agency responsible for these issues. And I remember some years back, a good few years, maybe about 10 years ago, Sean, this family had stopped to purchase corn, roasted corn on the side of the highway in Shogunas. And I believe everybody died. But a truck was coming on the highway and cleared out and collided with our vehicle.
Because they stopped in a lane, they didn't pull on the shoulder.
They did pull on the shoulder.
Oh.
Zero corn. After that, they removed us from that Shogunas highway, so you wouldn't actually see any.
Right.
You wouldn't see any vendors on that Shogunas highway at all. That was about 10 years ago.
Right.
We lost about 2 or 3 lives that day. I think the father had lived and the mother and the child had died.
Oh, God.
And it is an issue that we need to pay closer attention to. And as again, we talk about zero tolerance, but when the police act, we are often chastised. So we try to commit a balance in that with these issues. I understand. In this case, this caller is like zero tolerance. Another caller might call in and say, hey, or they could warn them first to them. Or they could talk to them and warn them. And if they continue, charge them. And again, we try. And we have a lot on our hands in terms of crime fighting and, traffic fines and to come and deal with vendors as well. So we have to deal with everything. We have to deal with children in school. We have to deal with invasions at the hospital, where people come to commit crimes, and then we have to place a police guard there. We have to police everything, and sometimes it's a bit difficult, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in the near future.
Okay.
We'll be able.
I just want to ask. I mean, this is why you should not be using the shoulders just willy-nilly.
No, because it naturally happens. You could stop to change a tire on the shoulder, and you would get knocked down.
Yes. Because
of how drivers react and behave. So they tend to, one of the things we noticed, so I did defensive driving. So in the police service, they send you on a defensive driving course, tactical driving course, depending on what department you're working in. And it is natural to lean in towards what you're looking at. So if there's somebody in the shoulder and you're driving at a high rate of speed or maybe even at slow rate of speed, it happens where your vehicle would tend to turn into that situation, that person or that vehicle because you're actually looking at them.
Yeah.
So it's a natural habit that as human beings we have. So that's why we always tell people to use the shoulder in the cases of emergency. And don't use it. The most dangerous thing is to use that shoulder to avoid traffic, because a driver might actually be looking at you in his rear view mirror, the side mirror, and while he's proceeding up, might actually tend to turn into the shoulder. And so emergency vehicles correctly should not use the shoulder. So you wouldn't really see, unless that person is taking his time on the shoulder as an emergency vehicle, you wouldn't really see emergency vehicles drive up a shoulder. They tend to go through the traffic because it's the safer route.
Right. And also,
right.
you drive up the shoulder, you could always have someone who just didn't look, who just swung out and said, I got to drive up the shoulder too.
Right, and pulls out into the shoulder and hits you. So you wouldn't really see, so if you look at the emergency vehicles really go through the traffic, you wouldn't really go up the shoulder.
Now to close, I'll just close with 2 things. One, I wish the police would have zero tolerance for people who park around in Savannah where there's no shoulder.
Right.
That's just me. But I think, we really take it for granted by the kind of crazy things we get away with. And we get away with too much more.
Like, we have 7 days in a week. We may not be able to come to that particular location 7 days a week.
Yeah.
other things will capture our attention and assistance and what
the crazy part is you can't even put no parking signs in the road there because it's a lane.
A lane, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And that's my issue. So, but like I said, people park their Mercedes-Benz in some of these spots, and I'm like, you getting away, boy, because I would have thought somebody would have had their car hit by now, because when I'm bending a corner, I'm not expecting someone to be parked in the lane because they went off to buy some food.
And if you think, and the scary thing is that if you collide with that vehicle, that Mercedes-Benz on that corner there, that vehicle parked, contributed to the accident, but nonetheless may not be wrong in the accident.
They're in a lane, though.
Yeah, because,
you
know? So they'll say, well, I shut down there.
No. They shut down to go buy some food. And
yes. Yeah. So like for Carnival, we have our mechanics at the transport branch work with licensing department. So when you get wrecked for Carnival, one of the excuses person, well, I shut down, and so our mechanics are on standby at licensing, ready to check your vehicle. So this one particular guy, he came and he's like, hey, I got shut down. He said, okay, they say, okay, let's walk across to the vehicle. And they call the mechanic. Before the mechanic reaches, he was like, hey, you know what? I'll pay my ticket. I'll pay my fine. And he just walked back to the tent. There was a tent. And he realized he couldn't get away with it.
Now, with that said, the other thing I want to close with, I guess the question is, for people who say zero tolerance, really, what part of our society suggests that we will be able to deal with and accept a zero tolerance approach? Because one of my issues is we're so laissez-faire. Look, we don't even want to take the flyover because we're too lazy to take the steps. Like, at what point will we as a society truly, because I think that would require a significant cultural shift.
Yeah. Because I think like jaywalking should be illegal in Trinidad. Because people walk across the road at ridiculous locations.
Yeah.
We also need better roads for pedestrians and to provide safe, better measures for pedestrians.
I mean, main road and highways, I don't know if it's illegal there. If it's not, it should be. Because, again, you could easily see where a pedestrian could cause an accident that could cause a traffic pileup. So now it's not, it's like the street racing. It's not just your life that you're risking.
Yeah.
It's other people's lives that you, whether you know it or not, that you're putting at risk. And it's compounded by other people's recklessness. And this is just the thing where, what do we want? Do we want to say who's to blame at the end, or do we want to stop it from happening from the beginning?
Yeah, and we would remind drivers to stay within the recommended speed limit. I know a person that rides the road is a highway. It's not. So the speed limit is not kilometers an hour.
Oh, yes. That's a good point.
So let's remember that you may be moving highway position into a normal roadway position, which might tend to move from 100 to 60.
Yeah.
So exit the Sir Solomon Hotel Highway heading north, and you come into the it's either the UH or the Sir Solomon Hotel. That part in Caroni there, entering into Bamboo and to go into Mount Hope.
Okay.
Drastically moves at the Caroni Bridge from 100 to 60.
Right.
Right, so you would actually see box there and speed traps there to catch people who don't observe that speed limit. So please remember to observe the speed limit, and especially as you're driving, the speed limit, stay within the speed limit helps you to brake properly so that you can stop the vehicle in a timely manner to avoid accident. And then you also want to look at the traffic conditions.
I think it's similar to the Savannah. The one good thing I have to say about my fellow Trimegonians, and maybe I just missed it, I remember when I was younger, I would have noticed on a morning more cars wrapped around light poles coming out by just after Queen's Hall, just next to Belmont.
Yeah.
And I haven't noticed it anywhere near as frequently these days, and I am so grateful for that, because those did not look like wrecks they were any survivors of, right? And that's just the Savannah. So,
what I can tell you, Sean, what we've observed is that when we do practice, as the TTPS, when we do practice the, what we call the zero approach, when we are more heightened in terms of traffic enforcement, the traffic laws enforcement, we do see better from members of the public. So when we have all these roadblocks and speed traps and checking your tires and checking your windscreen and whatnot, we do see better driving practices being conducted by members of the public. So I'm wondering if we really give everybody a ticket. We don't benefit from giving everybody a ticket.
Yeah.
There's no value for us as law enforcement. We don't get a commission or nothing like that. So there's no real benefit to us except that the roads are much safer when we do practice zero tolerance and these numerous roadblocks and whatnot. I know it's an inconvenience to members of the public, but it is a strategy to really bring down the rate of accidents, deaths, and injury on the roadway, and of course damages to vehicles. So I know members of the public are feeling inconvenience, and we've been asked or probably been told to really control it, but we do see better driving practices from members of the public when we as law enforcement practice these strategies to bring down that traffic rate of accidents and death and whatnot.
You know what, I'll say this, I don't have to slow down, I'm already driving slow. But even I do feel oh boy, there's a little bit more tension, I need to try and have a little bit more care. I don't know how, I don't really change my driving patterns, but even I feel it, whatever it is. So perhaps you're right, perhaps that's what we need. All right, thanks to Digger Martin for calling in, thanks ASP Arun for making it, even though you weren't necessarily 100% this morning. We appreciate you still joining us.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, folks, don't take road traffic safety for granted. And hey, for those that have young drivers in their household or soon to be young drivers, this is one of those things now. Too many young people have lost their lives for whatever reason on the roads. And perhaps the adults should take a little more care with regards to educating young people, the next generation of drivers. So just take it for granted. Well, it was fine. However, we did it in the past. They could do it now and still be fine. Let's not take it for granted with regards to things like road safety. So until tomorrow, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice, folks. Try not to be too stressed out with what's going on. There may be pros and cons with regards to the economic consequences as to what's going to happen to us with everything that's going on. We'll speak about that throughout the week. And until then, though, have a good day. You can make it if you try. We'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for you, wherever you are looking at the program and continuing to look at us. I'm Andy Johnson. Let's just tell you some things. I'm looking at a book, the cover, which says Steel Pan Vibrations, Unlocking the Human Mind. The author of the book is Dr. Savitri Rampasad. She's here to talk with us about the effect of pan, at least that's my interpretation of what I've read and the discussions I've had with her. And we just had a